Hi, everyone. That was such an incredible talk by Mary. Thank you so much, Mary, for sharing. Next, we have the absolutely incredible Nadja Komnenic, Head of Business Development, at Lemlist, and she is a sales leader, keynote public speaker, and YouTube host. The head of business development, she is leading a bootstrap SaaS startup, Lemlist, where she has pushed growth from 1 million to 10 million in APR in the last 2 years. She is a mentor helping women coming into SaaS. Everyone, we are so lucky to have her here. Nadja, please take it away.
Thank you, Anna, so much for the lovely, lovely introduction. As Anna said, everybody who's listening, I'm Nadja, Head of Business Development at Lemlist. We're going to have an amazing event today. I'm hoping you're going to stick with the remainings of the speakers today. We have some amazing speakers coming up. And the topic is one of my favorites, which is how do you achieve your product market fit and use it afterwards to actually sell better. So we're going to talk about this amazing topic that I know that a lot of founders are right now trying to get their heads wrapped around. And we're going to talk to specifically founders today or future founders that are trying to launch their businesses and how they can achieve their product market fit, make sure that they validate it, and once they do, how they can use it to sell better. So I'm going to start quickly with sharing my screen. As Anna mentioned before, I'm working as a head of business development at Lemlist, a French startup that managed to grow from $0 to $10 million in annual recurring revenue, completely bootstrapped. So bootstrapped meaning people that we haven't raised any single dollars from funding or spent any money on paid ads. And we managed to grow this fast in the 3.5 years. Starting in 2018 to today, where we crossed over $10 million in annual recurring revenue. Before we go into the topic of our call today, I want to first address all of you founders. I would imagine that we have a lot of founders here, and all of you future founders that are having the ideas on the businesses that you're about to launch. And before we go into the topic, I would like to really ask you to today, throughout all of the events that you're going to be listening to really keep an open mind and try to push and hide a bit your ego aside. As the goal for today's events that you're going to go through is to make sure that I would assume that all of you have some amazing, disruptive, crazy ideas that you think are going to stick, and it's going to be a potentially new unicorn. However, we really want to make sure today that all of your amazing ideas are actually amazing enough for a large portion of audience to actually want to, in the future, buy your product. And the way to do it is we're going to identify if you're actually close to finding your product market fit, and if your product or service that you're going to offer at one point is going to find their way to the hearts of your audience. So let's get this started. As I mentioned, I'm not sure if I'm going to skip from the slide to slide. Just give me a second. Oops. Okay. For some reason, guys, I'm struggling to go to the next slide of my presentation. I have no idea why. Give me a second. I'm so sorry for this, but I personally have no idea how to handle this. For some reason, Anna or Liz, if somebody can jump in and help me out to figure out should I change my slides here? Okay, now it's working. Perfect. Not sure if I done this or somebody from the backstage. Either way, as I mentioned, I've joined as the first sales hire actually at Lemlist, and at that point we were at $1 million in annual recurring revenue. My goal at that point was to actually take everything that our founder has built in the previous 2 years and to create our client acquisition strategy. Now, the reason that I was able to do it successfully and grow from 1 million to now more than $10 million in less than 2 years was strictly because our founder has done a wonderful job in identifying our product market fit before I've joined. So to all of your founders, if you're at one point looking to hire a new VP of sales, do us a favor and actually pay a close attention to what we're going to talk about today. So going to the next slide, if I'm able to share it, or is anybody on the backstage changing this for me? Perfect. In 2018, I'm going to share a quick story about Lemlist and how we managed to grow and find our product market fit. So throughout our story, we're going to share a lot of our mistakes, failures that we have made in the initial years. Hopefully it will help you avoid some of them. And I will share obviously our successes and what actually worked for us in identifying our own product market fit. So back in 2018, we had our 3 founders that got together, and we decided to actually invest $300 each into building a product that will enter a super insanely competitive market. So we're talking about 3 French dudes investing $900 into building a product that is about to compete with the companies that were on the market for more than 20 years, with a huge amount of funding, army of SDRs that were selling the products for them. And we decided to build a product and enter this competitive space. Now, obviously, a lot of network around us were telling us that might not be a good idea, that we're going up against like a mountain that we need to climb. However, our founder at that point decided to actually stick with this idea. Simply because he was an ex-agency owner that was actually using the tools that were on the market at that point, and realized that there is a pain that none of those software solutions were offering at that point. So to give you a bit of more clarity into what I'm talking about here and what Lemlist actually does, we basically decided to build a sales automation tool that will automate cold emails. Now, just ask yourself, and I would bet that every single person here on the chat already and on this event today is already using some kind of sales automation tool to automate their cold emails. Now, us going into this competitive market and actually wanted to compete with all of those guys was a very risky move, I would say. But at the end, we did know that at that point we had a very strong pain that none of the tools out there were solving, which is actually getting replies to your cold emails and doing it so by using actually personalization in your outreach. So today everybody's talking about personalized outreach, how you should add relevance, personalization into messaging. However, back in 2018, this was not such a hot topic. And Lemlist was actually the first tool to implement personalization features into our product. And that was the reason that we started to build Lemlist in the first place. So going to the next slide, basically going from the moment of us having such a huge great idea that we wanted to validate, we managed to actually grow from 0 to 10 million in 3.5 years, being profitable since day one. As I mentioned, we were bootstrapped, so being profitable was a key focus for us, and we managed to do it with 32 employees. Now, the reason for this and such a rapid growth was literally because we were able to find a product market fit. So this is what we want to do today to avoid you from spending hours, months, years of sleepless nights, of investing your time, money, resources, relationships into building something that might not actually get you to where you want to be, and you might get to a moment where you cannot scale and you cannot increase anymore your business. And obviously we want to avoid that moment and get you to the stage where you're actually able to grow without any marketing, without any sales, in the initial stages of your business, simply because you are validating that you have your product market fit. So going to the next slide, we're going to talk about right now, as I mentioned, Guillaume was at one point, our founder was an ex-agency owner. He realized that there was a pain that we wanted to address. So before you even start building a product, it's not only about the demand that you potentially see in your market. It's also about what is the pain that you want to solve, and making sure that that pain is existent in a large enough audience that you're going to be able to address. Going to the next slide, I apologize that I'm mentioning all the time, but somebody's helping me on the back end. The pain that we faced was getting the replies to the cold emails, and the solution, the ability to personalize cold emails at scale. So our initial product was actually that we started implementing tons of personalization features into our product when we started building it out. And we decided to go with dynamic images. Can you just move to the next slide, please? I apologize for this very unprofessional way of changing our slides, but what can we do? We're fine this is me speaking as a first speaker today, so hashtag no pressure. So we decided to bring these personalization features into our product, adding ability to basically personalize images at scale to catch the attention of the prospects that we're reaching out. Prospects had the ability to obviously see their custom tags being added to the images. And then following that, we were able to actually add logos of the companies, of the prospects that we were reaching out automatically into the emails. And feel free to just move through the slides, whoever is helping me. I'm assuming that it's Anna on the back end. So we were able to add dynamic logos into the emails itself, add video thumbnails and personalize them at scale. So if you're using right now Video, Drift, and all of these video tools for video prospecting, we had the idea initially to actually personalize the thumbnails so that people, once they open the email, actually catch their attention. And then it will lead them to the landing page where they will be able to watch the video itself and have a personalized landing page for them. So these were a couple of initial ideas that we had on how we are going to personalize outreach at scale and add features on top of what everybody else was offering. So 365 days later, we were able to achieve these numbers. So we went with month-over-month growth was at 33%. Monthly recurring revenue at 20K, and on top of that, our churn was actually way too high. So I'm getting a question from Jared. How did you know people wanted to see all this though? This is what we're gonna cover, Jared, in the future slides. But I would say that what made us realize that as before we even started building the product, Guillaume was an agency owner. So he was actually the one conducting outreach on behalf of his clients. And he realized, obviously, by networking with a lot of other agency founders and salespeople, that the biggest problem that everybody's facing was not even the tech stack. It was really the ability to get replies to the cold emails. And this is obviously the pain that we're all struggling with even today. So one of the, at that point, we didn't have any ways to actually personalize their outreach. So people were sending spammy messages, cold emails that were not really getting replies. And the reason for that is because in the initial phases, obviously, we didn't have technology to personalize properly our outreach. So at that point, we decided to bring personalization and give ability to people to actually personalize their outreach. Now, this was the initial moments of building out Lemlist. However, following that, our product has evolved based on the customer's feedback that we received, and this is what we're going to talk about really soon. So before we go into the how you identify and validate your product market fit and what are the stages, I want to make sure that everybody that is currently potentially looking to grow their businesses to think about one very important factor in growing your initial stages of your business, which is the phenomena that a lot of founders face, which is the internal dishonesty. So internal dishonesty is a phenomenon where we see that founders are actually validating they have this amazing idea. They believe that it's going to change the world, so they get stuck on it. They spend nights and nights of thinking about how it can change the world and the pain that they might be able to solve. And what they're looking for is that they're looking for a validation of that idea throughout their network, their friends, their family, speaking with the potential clients, and they're just getting, nodding, yes, this is an awesome idea, this might work, and they're relying only on that and asking for this validation from the people itself instead of actually validating it through the metrics. So going to the next part of if somebody can change the slides, we're going to go to the so founders will actually see how the world could be better with the product and want it so badly, so that all they do is actually day and night is they interpret all the signals as positive. So the important part is to realize that when everybody nods in agreement from your network, it's not the same as having the product market fit. Product market fit needs to be validated through the metrics itself. We can skip this slide because we're going to be out of time soon, and I want to go to the actionable part of the webinar. So first rule that we've wanted to have is that we wanted to validate our idea fast. So the one thing that we've done is we built a very bad looking product that had a very poor interface, and the motto that we went by was that if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So the mistake that we see is that founders would take months and months of trying to figure out the strategy, best growth strategy, ways to raise funding without actually building out anything and validating it with the audience. Instead of doing that, you want to build something and see if it's something that will actually stick with the audience that you want to target. Going to the next slide. We're actually going to take a look. Our first step in doing so was actually launching our product on the product hunt. The way that it helped us in the beginning is that we managed to get our product out there and see how many people will actually like the idea of what we want to build. It ended up being actually the #1 product of the day, but the mistake that we have made is that what we were offering as a potential value was actually not meeting in reality when it comes to the product. So we had a lot of dissatisfied people, but the one thing that it did help us is it did help us identify that there is a need and request for these types of personalization features. The next step for us was to actually launch on Appsumo, which is a huge community, if you haven't heard of it, that enabled us to get in front of a lot of people that were looking for lifetime deals with early stage products. And it helped us actually go to 160K in just 2 weeks, out of which we were able to get 30% out of when it comes to the revenue. But the main benefit of it was that we actually ended up having thousands of companies that started paying for Lemlist. Why this mattered is not only because of revenue, but for us, this gave us a chance to actually have a batch of people who are actually using the product that we can get feedback from. Going to the next slide, our most important step here was actually getting customers' feedback. We noticed that a lot of people were signing up, but our conversion rate from a free trial to a paid client was actually very low. So we actually started studying and testing our buyers' behavior. So we're not talking about here asking for their feedback and asking them questions on what they think. It's actually tracking the metrics of what they do once they enter the product on a free trial to actually then becoming a paid client. If the activation rate in our case was low, that was telling us that there was something wrong with the experience that they were having with a product. Now, going to the next slide, we actually managed to, give me a second for it to change. We decided to track these metrics. So the number of signups, number of activated users, and number of paid users. The most important metric here was actually number of activated users, because it's not just enough to acquire people to get interested in your product. It's if they're actually going to use it till the end. Going from here, the #1 fail that we have actually had in the beginning was that because our activation rate was low, we actually decided to make assumptions. So we decided to change our entire interface, thinking that that was the reason that people were not sticking with the product. What happened afterwards is that we actually had a very poor feedback from our clients in our community. So going to the next slide, you can actually see a couple of very angry customers back in the early days that were giving us very negative feedback on our interface change. Based on their feedback, we actually managed to change this and actually improve our product. Now, the biggest power and maybe the biggest takeaway that I want you to also have from today's event is that the reason that we were able to get this feedback is because we started building our own community in the early days. So going to the next slide, you will see that this community went to actually right now have more than 20,000 members. And in the early days, this was a critical part of us identifying our product market fit, because we had a community of early adopters that were openly expressing their own opinions on the product, of the platform, of how evolution of sales should look like, and what they're actually needing and missing on the market. This feedback that we've gotten from the customers itself and the changes that we have made to the product enabled us to actually increase our conversion rate from free trial to paid customers by three times and activation rate by 4 times. So going to the next slide, I'm going to quickly jump through this. The moment that we have hit this moment, the second fail that we have made, and I know that a lot of you might be tempted to do the same, going to the next slide as well, is that we got distracted from our main ICP, so ideal customer profile. So after that Appsumo launch that I mentioned, what happened is that we've gotten some very nice logos coming to us, such as Uber, Facebook, etc. And obviously, we were very tempted to go along and hunt these companies down, sign them as clients, put those big, nice logos on our website. And what ended up happening is that we've spent way too much time on companies that were actually not our ideal customer profile, where the product couldn't meet their needs, and we spent tons of resources trying to hunt down basically wrong audience. The most important part here is that you need to work backwards from your total addressable market and find out your real niche of who your target, who your product is actually going to help out the most. So the way that we've managed to do this, and the steps that we have taken to actually go and find out our product market fit, what is the clear value proposition for it, and who is our target audience at the end of the day, was actually by following the guidelines of Superhuman, a very amazing startup that had a very nice survey that they've launched. So going to the next slide, I'm going to show you how we implemented it at Lemlist. So our founder back in the day was actually deciding to do a survey on our current users at that point. So those Appsumo users that came to us, and actually launch a cold email campaign, sending out a survey, asking them a couple of questions. Now, as you can see here, he actually used videos in his outreach to actually catch the attention, make it personalized, and he was able to kind of get those early adopters to really connect with them in the first place. The reason that this worked, obviously, it took them to a landing page where they will be able to, going to the next slide, I will show you how the landing page itself looked like. This survey itself ended up having the very nice results. So we ended up having, if you can just skip to the 2 slides from now, please. We ended up having a very nice conversions on the survey itself. So 59% of the old customers that have actually received this email actually went through the survey. And the survey itself asks this question: how would you feel if you could no longer use Lemlist? Very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, and not disappointed at all. The benefit of this question is that once you ask these questions to your users, your idea is to get an understanding of who are going to be those people that if your product no longer ceased to exist, they would be very disappointed. And this is the group of people that you want to focus on mostly. This lets you know who the product is working for and the language that really resonates with them in the first place. This will actually get you to a moment where you will be finding your high expectation customers. High expectation customers are the customers that are going to be in love with your product, and they're going to actually spread the word around your product to the other companies and other potential users of your product. Once you segment them out, those are the very disappointed batch of people, and paint a picture of your high expectation customers, you're going to be actually measuring what is the percentage of people that answered very disappointed. The number that this should actually look like is that once you actually ask users how the product would how they would feel if your product no longer ceased to exist, and they answer very disappointed, this number should actually be above 40%. This is the number that came from Sean Elise that ran early growth Dropbox, LogMeIn, and Eventbrite. And the idea behind this number is that you're going to be able to find a batch of people that have used at least twice in the last 2 weeks your product. And if 40% or plus of them actually say that they would be disappointed in using your product, this is a good chance that you have your product market fit. In the beginning, there is high chances that you will not have this 40% rate. So your goal is to actually get to this 40%. The way that you will get there is that you will use this very disappointed group of survey respondents to narrow down who is your ideal customer profile. And then following that, you will ask a second question. So what type of people do you think would most benefit from Lemlist? This will actually give you a clear picture of who your ICP is, which definitely your VP of sales at one point is going to appreciate if you document it right. The third question to ask is, what is the main benefit that you will receive from Lemlist? So what are the key value propositions? And if the answers align with what you had in mind and how you wanted to build your product. And the fourth question would be, how can we improve Lemlist for you? This feedback here is critical because it's going to help you actually build your roadmap around it. Now, the most important part is that in this stage, you really want to ignore the feedback from that you've gotten from people who said they won't be disappointed at all if your product doesn't exist. These are not people that are going to give you feedback that will help you out build your roadmap, because they will not be interested in your product in the first place. And it might help you actually get distracted from your really the roadmap. Now, you want to analyze the somewhat disappointed group of people, and because those are the people who are on the verge to get converted into fanatics, so like the very disappointed batch of people. These, once you actually are able to cater to the feedback of somewhat disappointed people, and you build a product around it, you're going to actually convey them to kind of become the very disappointed batch of people, which will actually increase that number from, let's say, 20% to 40% plus. So the goal here is to actually identify your metrics. So I'm going to go skip a bit of the slides because we have 3 minutes left. And to really make sure that while you're building out your product market fit, that you're leading with metrics and identifying the metrics that you want to track. To increase your product market fit score, you need to spend half of your time doubling down on what your users already love, so your key value propositions, and the other half on addressing what's holding others back. So that second batch of not somewhat disappointed people. The goal is to repeat the process and make the product market fit score as the most important metric in your first initial stages of growth. Now, the mistakes that we see happening all the time across the board, and we're speaking with a lot of founders that sometimes succeed with their startups and sometimes unfortunately fail, is, as I said, first, internal dishonesty and sticking just to their own gut that this is something that can work. So try to put that ego aside a bit and actually validate it through some of the numbers. Again, not tracking metrics. Make sure that you have your metrics in place while you're tracking out your growth in the initial stages of growth. And the third, and my favorite, not a mistake, I don't like the mistake itself, but I do see it happening all the time, is that founders tend to delegate too fast. So they would focus on raising funding. They would focus on just the way to grow the business, etc., instead of actually spending initial months of learning, communicating, exchanging with their potential customers. And those initial stages are critical in growing your business, because this is where you really understand your ICP, you understand what is the pain, and you're able to eventually grow your business and build your roadmap around it. This is also the moment where you're getting your most loyal customers and the ones that are going to stick with you long term. Now, mistake number 4, obviously, is like trying to cater everyone instead of one niche. So this is what we mentioned, like about sticking to your product, not listening to your audience and coming up with features without actually validating there is a need for that in the initial stages. Not documenting all of the learnings, because once your VP of sales at one point comes in, you don't want to repeat everything that you've been learning for years before they came in. And thinking that product market fit is a one-time action versus the process itself, which you need to always go back to and validate in the meantime. Signs that that you actually have found your product market fit is that you know that the word of mouth is not spreading. So if people are not talking about your product or sharing and statically expressing it to the others, you have not probably found your product market fit. Users are not engaging with your product. Sales cycles are taking too long. A lot of deals never close. Reviews are poor. Users isn't growing that fast, and users aren't churning. So we ran out of time, although I had a couple of more slides that I wanted to share with you all. But I really hope this very short event today was actually actionable enough. And I would really encourage all of you to really not to spend time figuring out your product market fit instead of rushing it, racing after the investments and funding, because at the end of the day, no matter the greatest VP of sales you can get, the amount of funding that you get, or the best marketing in place that you might have, if you don't have product market fit and you don't have people that are willing to buy your product, there is no way that your business is gonna succeed. So hope this was useful and actionable enough. Hope you enjoyed the event. And if anybody wants to connect, obviously I'm on LinkedIn. If you have more questions, feel free to ask me anytime. And I hope you really enjoy the remaining of today's event.